listener production.
Hey, Chris Spyrou with you. Welcome to The Briefing. Of all the things in the world currently tracking and surveilling you, would you think your council bin was one of them?
It is somehow curious that people would be worried about a microchip with a number on it in their bin, and yet they're carrying around a very highly complex computer in their hand, which has every single bit of information about them.
My two-part deep dive into how something as unsuspecting as your wheelie bin is keeping tabs and the ways it could be used against you kicks off in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Thursday, the 17th of July.
Hey, Chris, and to you listening, we're starting this morning in the US, where Donald Trump has sensationally turned on his own supporters, labelling them weaklings over the ongoing Epstein Files saga, claiming they're, quote, falling for a bullshit scam, Chris. It comes after Trump and the administration denied that a client list of disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein exists, leading to them being accused of a cover-up in a bid to protect the president and other powerful figures who might have been implicated. And that's because of various occasions where people like US Attorney General Pam Bondi have acknowledged its existence and said the administration would release the names.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review.
Are we going to see who was on the flights?
What you're going to see, hopefully tomorrow, is a lot of flight logs, a lot of names.
Yeah, a lot of flight logs and a lot of names that we haven't seen just yet. But Bondi's since come out to deny that's what she meant, instead insisting she was referring to the Epstein Files more broadly rather than a specific client list. Since the walkback, Trump supporters and Republicans, including Trump's own daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, have joined calls to release all remaining documents relating to Epstein to clear the air, arguing if there's nothing incriminating on them, Trump and others should have nothing to worry about. Trump has since said Bondi should release any credible documents, but then earlier today took to socials to say, quote, "The Democrats' new scam is what we will forever call the Jeffrey Epstein hoax, and my past, in capitals, supporters have bought into this bullshit hook, line and sinker."
Yeah, wow. And he goes on to talk about having more success in 6 months than any president in the country's history. But all anyone wants to talk about is the Epstein hoax and how he doesn't want those weaklings to support him anymore. I mean, wow. And Trump has also called this continued focus on Epstein boring, and we heard him lash out at that reporter who asked him about it the other week. And I mean, it's this language and attitude, I think, that it's just not doing him any favours. If he's not on the list or if there's not one, cool, say that and then release the documents, but also understand and validate why people care about this. This man was a horrific sexual predator. He abused and trafficked underage girls, and it was his relationship and his influence over the rich and powerful that allowed that to go on for so long. So I think it's this pushback and this stance that he's taking that makes it appear worse and guilty.
To the Middle East now, where Israel has struck the capital of Syria, hitting the Defense Ministry's headquarters and an area near the presidential palace in Damascus, killing at least 3 people and wounding 34 others. Despite pressure from the US to de-escalate, it's the third day in a row that Israel has attacked its northeastern neighbour, with the Israeli government claiming the strikes are needed to protect a minority group, the Druze community, who are involved in deadly clashes with pro-government tribes.
Yeah, and this morning, Syrian authorities announced a new ceasefire between the armed Druze forces and Bedouin tribes, hoping to bring an end to the clashes that are said to have claimed more than 300 lives in recent days. And it comes as the United Nations Secretary Antonio Guterres has condemned Israel's airstrikes and redeployment of forces on the ground in Syria, calling for an immediate end to all violations of the country's sovereignty, Chris.
Yeah, and I think that's a point that gets lost when we talk about the Middle East, Tara. It's the equivalent of these strikes is, in an Australian context, is like striking the Lodge or the ADF headquarters in Canberra. So that's kind of, what we're dealing with here. Something to note, though, is that around 150,000 Druze people do live in Israel. Some are members of the IDF, and they're obviously embedded in the community there. So Israel does have an interest in supporting them. But some experts say that these are quite opportunistic strikes by Israel to weaken Syrian forces, whom they don't want growing more powerful in the region. But if this new regime in Syria falls, that leaves a potential gap that could very well be filled by the Islamic State or Turkish-backed militia, which the international community has repeatedly warned against.
Aussies living in our major cities are growing less and less likely to have kids, with the country's birth rate declining further this year, reaching a new near-record low. And it's our cities, Chris,
Shock.
Sydney, Brisbane and Melbourne, that saw the biggest drop, according to a recent analysis of ABS data, while areas in regional Australia and Perth saw slight increases, but not enough to curb the overall decrease us city folk are causing, Chris.
Yeah, according to the KPMG analysis, people living in regional Australia and outer suburbia are more likely to have more children. Right now, the Aussie childbearing average is 1.51 children. Okay. I don't know how you quantify 1.51, but anyway, compared to 1.8 kids about a decade ago. And that's down to things like young people delaying the age they want to have a kid in the face of the current cost of living crisis, people wanting to feel secure with housing, properties becoming more expensive, etc., etc. In summary, things are cooked and we are choosing actively to not have kids in the cities.
Yeah, and interestingly, of all the capital cities that saw a drop in the birth rate, Melbourne actually had the biggest, and theirs has gone from having 1.71 kids born per woman to 1.4 last year. And those areas like the regions that saw increases, they're actually putting that down to things like having better access to affordable homes and job opportunities, which I find interesting. And look, I can completely relate to this. I get asked every Christmas dinner or barbecue for the last 10 years when I'm having kids, and I'm 32 and I still don't feel ready. Like, I bought a house in recent years. That's expensive. Life is expensive and stressful, and I love my career. And while I see kids in my future, I just don't feel ready to put that as my number one yet. And I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. Ooh.
Yes, and that is something I can relate to. But, I love using the cost of living as a cover for, not being in a relationship and not having kids. For me, I'm just like, yep. Guys, it's the cost of living and not my cripplingly single life that's leading me to have no kids.
Australian workers are losing $110 million a week thanks to unpaid super. Analysis of tax data by the Super Members Council shows that around 3.3 million of us lose an average of $1,730 in super a year, with workers in the ACT and NT facing some of the highest average losses, both sitting above the 2K mark. And as to the states most impacted, New South Wales is leading the charge, where over 1 million workers have been underpaid super, followed by nearly 850,000 people in Victoria and over 370,000 in WA. And the council says that when compared with their analysis last year, super underpayment increased by $600 million. So it's a problem that's getting worse, not better, and it could mean up to $30,000 will be missing from our retirement nest eggs, Chris.
Yeah, I know, it's horrible, but how does it all happen is the question I had. Well, it turns out that super underpayment is sometimes accidental and often comes down to timing. So while our wages are paid weekly, fortnightly, or even monthly, employers only have to pay super quarterly, and that can lead to missed or delayed payments with accounting, payroll, etc., etc. But that is all set to change from July 1 next year. Mark your calendars, because that's when new laws will require super to be paid on payday, and it's a move expected to add nearly $8,000 to the average retirement balance.
Well, good. However, that $110 million lost a week translates to $5.7 billion a year. So advocates say those reforms can't come soon enough.
And two footy legends have gone head-to-head, not on the field, but in the ring.
And onto the ropes and nearly over them went Sonny Bill as Gallen shoved him towards the ropes, but Sonny Bill let him fall.
That's right. Former New South Wales State of Origin captain and Australian vice-captain Paul Gallen took on former All Blacks great Sonny Bill Williams in a boxing grudge match in Sydney last night.
And the fight's been on the cards for a long time to settle a decade-long feud between the pair, and, of course, it didn't finish without a bit of controversy.
By split points decision, red corner, Paul the G-Train Gallen!
The G train. Now that caused a bit of a ruckus, with some saying that Sonny Bill Williams was robbed. Chris?
Yes, he lost a point for holding Gallen in round 7 and obviously wasn't happy with the result, legging it straight after the scores were read out. But Gallen supporters say he earned it. All in all, it just tells me it was a pretty good match to watch because it was so tight. I mean, we were asleep, Tara. We have to be asleep so we can get online and do these headlines. But from all the articles and all the tweets that I've seen, it seemed to be quite an interesting watch.
Yeah, the highlights are great, and particularly given both of them have come from footy backgrounds and hadn't fought anyone for several years, unlike that horrific Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson nightmare that aired on Netflix. My God, that should never have been made into TV. But this was actually pretty cool to watch, and it seemed that, people actually thought this was a pretty good fight. And meanwhile, for Gallen, he said that is it for him. He just wanted that win.
Oh, seriously,
and now,
thank God.
That's it for his sporting career, he reckons. I mean, we've heard that before with the NRL, but what code would he possibly try next?
Oh, I don't know. And look, not to be ageist, but he's 43, Sonny Bill's 39. The two of them should not be getting in the boxing ring and having a crack at each other's heads. It's just awful.
Okay, I'm going to defend them. They're not old, Chris. They're
Well, the ages of boxers, copping it to the head, it's not great even for a young person. I'm like, even when you're getting a little bit older and stuff like that, why are you voluntarily putting you in the way of a potential brain injury? I feel very passionately about this, if you can't tell.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's this last clutch at 15 minutes of fame. No, they're both massive greats in their sports, but just why do we have to try another one? You're already good enough at rugby union and NRL. Why do you have to take out boxing as well? But anyway, good on them. It was a great match to watch.
Yes, I will take your word for it. That brings our headlines to a close for today. Up next is part 1 of my 2-part deep dive, looking into whether your bin is spying on you. I'm not talking about your kitchen bin. I'm talking about the bin that you wheel out to the curbside every week. Stick around. That deep dive is coming up for you next. How would you feel knowing your council was spying on you? I know it sounds wild, but stick with me. I was scrolling TikTok not too long ago and stumbled on this video that's racked up 1.3 million views.
A lot of councils, not all councils, but a lot now are putting these chips under your bin. So I'm not even going to say what it is because people accuse me of fake news or, making stories up, but go Google, enlighten yourself.
So I did just that. I Googled and enlightened myself, but not before popping outside to check my council bins, and to my horror, there it was. A little green chip the size of an air tag fixed under the brim of not only my red, but also my yellow and green bin. Now, to be fair, my council did send a letter that these tags were coming earlier in the year, but I'm more of an email and text kind of guy. But the point is, these tags do exist. They've been around for decades, were first trialled in Australia back in the 2000s, and now they're on more of our bins than not. So what exactly do they do? And when paired with all the other tech surrounding us, what could they be doing? Richard Kirkman is the CEO of one of our country's leading waste management providers, Veolia, Australia and New Zealand, and he joins me in part 1 of this deep dive. Richard, welcome to the briefing. Why have you microchipped our bins?
Microchip the bins. Well, look, these are kind of what we would call dumb tags. This is not a case of bin brother is watching you. It's really just an updated version of a barcode. There are millions of bins around the country. There's different coloured lids. They're assigned to different properties. And this gives us a modern way of tracking them. It's like an inventory that we can keep count of. Bins go missing, neighbours swap them around. They lose track of things. This enables us to track it.
What sort of information do these RFID chips specifically collect? Is it just that a bin has been collected at a certain address?
So the tags are not collecting any information. The tag just contains a number inside it. And when our truck collects the bin, it reads the number. That's all we're doing. And then the rest of it happens at our end. We're able to use that information to know where we collected it. Did we collect it at the right place? We get hundreds of queries every day. Oh, you haven't collected my bin. We're able to send that information to the householder or to the commercial establishment to say it wasn't there. In some cases, we're using upgraded technology using AI. We're taking photos of when there is a bin missing. So we're able to tell a customer that. So this is all about providing a better service. It's not about spying on people. It's not about collecting people's data and information. Nothing is used or sold in terms of data. It's purely about bringing waste management up to date with the latest technology.
You mentioned a few things there. One of the things is cameras, so the picture-taking capabilities. What can you tell us about the cameras that are fixed in the fleet?
I don't think there's ever been a time when waste management has been as sexy as it is today, because we're using
choice words there, Richard.
appealing and exciting, because we're using all the latest AI technology to do a number of things. One of those things is using the power of vision of this technology to identify if there's contamination in organic bins, for example. And if it's contaminated with batteries or electronic equipment, we can't recycle it. We can't turn it back into fertilizers to put back on the land, which is the whole purpose of doing that. And batteries, are a generic problem across Australia. We have probably one fire a week in our trucks due to batteries. And we really need to be able to identify that and reduce those fires for safety reasons. So if we can find that contamination with the camera looking in the bin, then we can educate about not doing it. So again, it's not to catch people out. We're not trying to harm people with this technology. We're trying to improve what we're doing.
You mentioned earlier that this data doesn't get shared with third parties, but, by nature of your agreement with council, I'm assuming that the data does get shared in that capacity. How does a council use the data that you collect?
It depends on the agreement we have. Some local councils, we don't do this at all, and some, they want us to do this. They want us to identify where, there is contamination, and then, we might leaflet a bin the next time we go to say, can you please remember to put these things in? All the data is anonymized. We're not using this publicly. We're following all the data protection rules and laws that exist, in fact. It's no different to any other organization that has a customer relationship and has that customer's data and then is using that to provide the service.
In terms of issuing of fines, what role does your company kind of play in sharing information in that capacity?
We're not directly involved in fines. And I think, fines is used very frugally. I would say it's not really the first port of call. We know from research that the best way to get better recycling rates and better composting rates is to kind of make it a competition of who's doing it best. And if we say, this street is the best at recycling, we know other streets want to do the recycling even better. So, we don't really follow a mantra of fines. It's not something that I'm directly involved in. We're more about trying to incentivize the right behavior.
I am curious to get your read on this, though, Richard. There are strong reactions to these RFID chips at the moment. It's not new. This tech has been around for almost 2 decades now, at least in Australia. It rears its head every now and then, but it's having a moment on TikTok. Are you surprised by the conversations and the skepticism that's surrounding this technology?
Look, I'm not surprised. I was doing waste management in the UK 20 years ago, and RFID tags were introduced, and the headline was "Bin Brother is watching you." And it's the completely normal reaction, clearly. People think we're spying on them. They think we're collecting their data. And it's not the case. I think if there was a barcode on the side of the bin, people would be less worried about that, because you see barcodes throughout the supermarket on every product. And really, it's just an updated version of the barcode. It's a number on the RFID tag. So really, it's a basic requirement to provide a good service. We are not about getting people's data.
Well, it's interesting because my reading of it is it's almost like a contest between efficiency and innovation, and people having this fear that we're moving towards an increasingly digitized world in which smart homes and smart cities are becoming the norm. I think if you ask someone 20 years ago, would they have expected their bins to be fitted with a microchip? The answer would be no, you're crazy. But it seems like now we're living in that moment. Do you think, and I'll ask you to put your future goggles on, where do you think this goes? How much further does the technology come in our day-to-day things like our bins?
Yeah, clearly tech is pervasive in our society now. And, it is somehow curious that people would be worried about a microchip with a number on it in their bin. And yet they're carrying around a very highly complex computer in their hand, which has every single bit of information about them, where they're walking, what they're doing, what they're saying all day long. Surely, if you're worried about a bin, you wouldn't have a mobile phone. But I guess that's not the case. I think we will go further down this road, clearly. Everything has a chip in it these days. I don't think there's some, Machiavellian scheme to get people's information. But ultimately, I suppose if you don't like it, you can voice that, and that's the conversation that we're having now. And that's part of it. Is absolutely a really important part of the change, that people voice their concerns and we're able to answer to it, I suppose.
Well, I mean, there's one thing in voicing it. What are sort of the tangible actions that people can do? We can lend our voices to causes all we like, but can we take the microchip? I'll refrain using the microchip because it feels inflammatory. Are we at a point where we can be taking the RFID tags off our bins and still be provided the service by companies like yours?
Well, I guess that'd be a bit like going to the supermarket and scrubbing off the barcodes before you get to the point of sale and then trying to buy the goods. You're kind of disrupting a system which is built around giving you a better service. So that's just going to make the council have to go out, reissue those bins, pay again to do that, increase the cost of local taxation. That's not going to help society in any way. I think it's good to have the debate, disrupting the system where most people, I think, are not too concerned about this. So I kind of think if you look at it that way, it's really a little bit harmless.
So from the sounds of it, though, there's no scope for people to opt out of this particular service.
I guess it would be like saying, I don't want to have this container. I'd like to have a different container, a round one with a purple lid. It's not really how this public service is conceived, that you can choose to do it a different way. The option may be to go and live in the country and not have any waste collection.
Okay, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Richard, thank you so much for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks, Chris.
That was CEO of Veolia Australia and New Zealand, Richard Kirkman, speaking with me there. But wait, there's more, and it is wild. In part 2, I chat with a former FBI and US intelligence officer about how this kind of data, when combined with all the other tech in your life, could be twisted and used against you in ways you'd never expect. I'm talking counting your wine bottles in your wheelie bin to deny you health insurance. There's a hook and tease for ya. That chat is in your feeds right now. I'm Chris Spyrou. Catch you there.
Listener.